I love asking you quiz questions. So, Zachary, which major economy derives the highest percentage, based on the first 9 months of 2023, of its electricity from clean sources?
Hmm. The Netherlands.
I don't know if that's a good guess because I don't know where the Netherlands lie, but it's Brazil. And they
Oh,
have recently
Holland.
just.
Holland. The Netherlands is Holland.
No, no, I know. But I'm saying that I don't. I realize that. Thank you. But
It's like, I think you know where the Netherlands are, but, maybe not.
now that I don't know where it lies geographically, I mean, I don't know where they lie as far as percentage of their electricity coming from clean energy
Oh,
sources. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, no, no. But in case anyone's confused, yes, Holland and Netherlands, western coast of Europe. And the answer is Brazil. And they have just dislodged France. Brazil is at 93% of their electricity is now coming from clean sources. This is because Brazil is putting in a ton of wind and solar, and France took a step back from using nuclear.
Well, I just looked this up. Interestingly enough, 81% of the Netherlands is fossil fuel. So I was like so wrong about the Netherlands. It's
That's
not even
surprising,
funny.
though. Is
Yeah, I mean, I would
81%
have
of
thought
their
it would be much
electricity?
more. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So
Wow.
they're not even. I mean, it was just a terrible, terrible guess on my part.
I thought it was good, to be honest.
Yeah,
So
I
we're
mean,
both wrong.
it sounded right. I thought, water. They're underwater. They must be using a lot of hydro, but no, that was just wrong.
Disappointing,
Uh,
Holland. Disappointing.
I know, and surprising with Brazil, given that the attention that Brazil tends to get when it gets attention in our world is either massive political dysfunction between Bolsonaro and various corruption trials over the past 15 years, including at one point the imprisonment of Lula, who is now the president of Brazil, or deforestation and the devastation of the Amazon basin. So we unfairly, I think, tend to, when Brazil gets attention, it's for these negative factors, right? Either politics or environmental degradation, not environmental, constructive use of environmental resources and renewables. Uh, so, and I'm totally guilty as charged. I would not have, other than knowing it, Brazil would not have been in my top 10 guesses, even with my first guess having been colossally wrong. Uh, so that's a fascinating mismatch between, as it were, public image and actual economic and climate reality. And we've pointed to this a lot in different conversations we've had, that there is a narrative about what's going on in climate that's often at odds with the reality of what's going on in terms of solutions to carbon-based emissions and industrial economies. So that was a really good statistical lesson that I hope I have learned.
I mean, for me, the question was because Lula recently came into power after Bolsonaro, like you mentioned, there must have been a large proportion of this wind and solar installation being done before Lula. I mean, he's on the left, as you mentioned. It makes sense that he would be pro environment, pro climate change, green transition, et cetera, et cetera. But there's no way that he could have just done that from scratch. So that makes me very curious about how much they were already doing, to your point of lots of stuff goes on that we wouldn't necessarily assume based on political leaders.
Yeah, think of Texas today. Massive wind and
Mm.
solar power generation, even as it's the oil capital of the United States. Same thing in Oklahoma, because they have lots of sunshine and lots of wind. Those renewable resources are plentiful in those parts of the United States, and there's economic incentives to take advantage of that, which they have. So you have a similar dynamic, I think, in the United States, where the narrative may be, in Texas, we're just pumping oil because Houston's an oil town, or Oklahoma, we're pumping oil because Tulsa's an oil town, when in reality, they're also some of the most dynamic, aggressive generators of wind and solar energy.
So, last point about the climate, another massive generator of wind and solar energy that people may or may not know, and that's China.
15 years ago, China could produce 6 times as many solar panels as the US. Look at what's happened since then. It can now make 70 times as many. That massive production capacity means China alone is able to install more than half of the world's new solar panels this year.
This is another piece in the very complicated climate puzzle. China is building a bunch of new coal plants and permitting new coal plants, and they get a slap on the wrist for that, but they also get a cookie because they have reached their clean power targets 5 years early. So their targets for wind and solar capacity, they are set to reach them in 2025. Those targets were set for 2030. So yeah, I think, again, this just goes back to the massive renewable installation going on right now that is really hard to see happening, but is happening like absolute madness.
Yeah, again, and China has been excoriated for building lots of coal plants, excoriated by the environmental community, obviously, for building lots of coal plants, which they continue to do because there has been continued need for power generation. But there's also been a massive competition with China over their subsidizing low-cost solar panels. That was part of the Inflation Reduction Act in the United States. Part of the intent was to subsidize or make sure the United States has a more competitive solar production industry relative to China. Same thing with batteries, right? That's been another sore spot. But China has been, for its own particular reasons, the Chinese Communist Party may not allow any particular political dissent, but if the air is so polluted that people's kids are developing emphysema or need more health care, there's no way the Communist Party's been able to resist that particular set of critiques that it's not doing an adequate job creating decent living standards for Chinese people. And that's been an issue. So the Chinese government's actually been pretty aggressive about making a transition. Also because it doesn't want to be dependent on foreign imports of resources that it doesn't have domestically. It has lots of coal, but it doesn't have much in the way of oil and petroleum. And so, like any other robust, dynamic, powerful society, China doesn't want to be dependent on external sources of energy. The United States hasn't either. So there's real incentives, sort of nationalistic incentives, to develop renewable sources as a way of offsetting, and nuclear as well.